April observing sessions on episode 481 of the Actual Astronomy podcast. I'm Chris, and joining me is Shane. We are amateur astronomers who love looking up the night sky, and this podcast is for everybody who enjoys going out under the stars. So we've had some observing in recently, Shane. We'll get to that in a moment, but we were reading an email here from one of our Patreon supporters. And we have lots, and it's great. There's lots of people who contribute a few dollars a month or annually or whatever, and we always appreciate that. Hey.
Yeah, we certainly do. So, as always, thank you to all of the Patreon supporters. And if life circumstances change and your Patreon support has to change, you won't offend us in any way. We just appreciate it whenever we can get it.
Yeah, every once in a while we hear from folks, and we did hear from an individual today who's been a very kind and generous supporter. And but I felt bad. It seemed like they felt bad that they were pausing their Patreon support, but that's totally fine. We just do this for fun, and we're really just looking to cover our expenses. Hey, Shane.
Exactly. Yeah, we're not going to retire early due to the podcast.
No, no, not at all. And like we really appreciate the support because it enables us to do it without either sacrificing other things in life. And it does. The Patreon support level that we currently have from all the generous folks out there is enough to cover the costs. And as long as we get those costs covered, it's just a lot of fun to do. And then we don't have to kind of jostle things around or sacrifice our own astronomy equipment purchases, and it's gone really well. But um, you know, either way, it's just one of those things. We understand if people can't always support. And the other thing is, Shane, I think we've talked about this before too, is that it's not really the intent to get like a huge number of Patreon supporters. At least in my mind, I always thought, well, it'd be nice if sort of person A was able to contribute 1 year, and then they do it for a year or a while or whatever they see fit, and then the next year person B kind of takes on the load. It's not really something where we're looking to accumulate like a vast number of Patreon supporters. We're really just trying to maintain that level of expense coverage.
For sure.
Yeah. Anything else to add to that before we get into our great observing capades?
Let's get into the observing that we did. Yeah.
Yeah, so you and Mike were able to come out, and that was it's always a lot of fun when the both of you are able to make it. So thank you very much for coming out. It was a blast.
Yeah, it was great. I always enjoy observing with other folks. I'm fine to observe by myself, but what I enjoy about observing with other people beyond the conversation is just the different objects that we all want to look at. And, you guys always have stuff to look at that maybe isn't on my list. And, I kind of think it goes all the way around like that. So it's a neat way to observe some objects that you may not have probably looked at. So, and of course, 7-inch refractor, a lot of fun.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it was a little bit of a weird night for me because I hadn't run the observatory in a little while for a variety of reasons. Like we had a bad cold snap, and then poor weather conditions, and the nights that were clear just didn't work out for me to get out here. And so I was installing a few new things like the new cables and trying to make sure those worked, and then futzing around, like I'm still getting used to a couple things like how the Sky Safari connects to it. And then I started messing around with the Barlow, and I'm like, oh, like you guys don't want to mess around with the Barlow, you want to observe. But I sort of had a few things I needed to do. And so anyway, hopefully you can come back, because I did really want to try the Bino Viewer in the scope. It's just I wasn't sure how the back focus worked on it, and I kind of thought if we get into that before I even figure out how to mess around with the back focus in monocular mode, well, it might take some futzing with anyway to get a Bino Viewer to work. But anyway, I think I got how the scope works figured out for back focus now. So anyway, hopefully we can try that one day.
Yeah, for sure we can. One thing with the Bino Viewer, which might make it a little challenging with like your setup in the observatory, is ideally you want to be seated so that your eyes, or in our cases, our glasses, are kind of squared with the eyepiece. Because if you start to hit the Bino Viewer at an angle, this is like some people complain that they can't merge images in Bino viewers,
Oh yeah.
and there's a number of reasons why that or that can contribute to that. And one of them is you're not squared up on the Bino viewer.
Oh yeah.
So I don't know. There's we can pick some objects where
Yeah.
it's a little higher so that we can use a chair, and then you can
Yeah.
at least get a sense for what the Bino viewer does with that scope and kind of go
Yeah.
from there, I guess.
One thing I did kind of sort of with that in mind, that's like one of many reasons why I did this, since you folks wrote, is I put in another observing chair that I designed and built, which sounds really fancy, but it's not. I discovered that you can't really find like a good adjustable stool for like using at the telescope.
Hmm.
That's just, unobtainium. And so I was looking around just on Amazon and found that um, there was a variety of stools, like many different stools that had a component that I was like, oh, I wish that stool would raise and lower this much because you want a lot of extension. You want to be able to go very low and very high, right?
Hmm.
And most adjustable stools, either they're a high stool that has like maybe 6 inches of adjustability, or it's a very low stool, which has that, or somewhere in between. I'm like, well, I don't want to have multiple stools. That would just suck.
Hmm.
I don't have the room for it. And it would end up costing like hundreds of dollars, right? Because, a good stool is going to run about, I don't know, maybe 75 or $80. And so what I ended up doing, Shane, is I discovered that you can buy the replacement parts for all of these different stools. And so I just bought the replacements for the component that I wanted for each of the stools. So I bought I don't know what the base is, but it's like that star pattern that the wheels go on. I bought one of those. It came with these really crummy wheels, but I bought these replacement lockable glow in the dark rollerblade wheels.
Oh, okay.
So I was like, well, this is great because you can put a bright light on them, or just even during the day
Yeah.
they'll collect enough light that then you can see kind of where the base of the chair is. And they're lockable. Unlike a lot of these stools, they don't have lockable wheels. And I think not having lockable wheels on your observing chair, if it's going to have wheels, is kind of a risky venture unless it doesn't roll well, which kind of defeats the purpose of having the wheels on it anyway.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then I bought a extra long gasket. So you could buy an extra long gasket that goes with like a particular stool. And then I bought a particular seat that I thought would work well with this, and seems to. And then I bought a stainless steel footrest for it. So that
Hmm.
when you're raised up nice and high, you can put it on. It has almost it goes up almost as high as the Burlap, and it goes down to almost as low as the Burlap. Not quite, but that would enable us to have two chairs in there because you're significantly taller than me. So we could have two chairs even going in there, so that then we're not trying to adjust the chair every time we switch back and forth as well. And then, like you were saying, it's nice to have that range so you can be square to the eyepiece. And I always like the idea of just having that stool with the gasket that you can raise and lower a little bit easier than the Burlap, which you have to get off and manually adjust the chair and then get back on and see if it's the right height. It always seems much more futzy to me.
Hmm. Well, that'll be interesting. That could work quite well.
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, before you guys came out that night, I put on the new Lynx cables.
Mm, yeah.
It's LYNX if people are looking for replacement cables to their Skywatcher or Celestron mounts. I don't know what they're compatible with. I know they're compatible with the AZ EQ6. I can tell you that. And I can't recommend these. Like these, I meant to say, I can't recommend them enough. I totally
Mm.
recommend the Lynx cables. They weren't inexpensive, but they weren't crazy expensive. And I was having some minor cabling trouble.
Hmm.
I didn't like the length of the standard cables that came with the mount. One of them was like, well, you got different components of different links, like depending on whether it's going to the power brick or to the mount itself. I think there's like three different sections of cable, and the ones that were too long were ones that I wanted short. The ones that were too short, I wanted much longer. So I was able to order the specific length from Lynx, for the power. And then also I debated on this, but I'm really glad I did this, is I bought a new hand controller connecting cable as well.
Mm.
And that is brilliant. And these cables are very heavy duty silicone. I think they're supposed to be good to, I think it says like plus 50 to negative 50 or something like that somewhere in the literature. But certainly I've had them out well below zero now and even left them out there. Like I feel totally comfortable just leaving them in the observatory and they don't get stiff. Like the other cables would get really, really stiff. And these ones, there's no stiffness. They just work perfectly. So highly recommend.
Yeah, they look really well made and, ideal for a colder climate, and a little more length to like to sort of give you, I guess, a little more time before you would get a cord wrap potentially, even though I think you have your mount configured not to do that. But nevertheless, it doesn't hurt to have a little bit of extra kind of movement ability there.
Yeah. The mount is configured
Hmm.
to not cord wrap.
Hmm.
Alistair configured it.
Hmm.
It's just, I don't want to take credit, but he spent some time, and I really appreciate the guidance and effort he's given me, as he's given many people. Really nice. One of the advantages of joining an astronomy club and being a member of an astronomy community is there's people like that out there who can give you a hand no matter what level you're at or what stage you're at in your observing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Oh, so what did you think? What did you think of the views? That was sort of, I think, your second time at the 7 inch, and yeah, just curious to hear if large refractors are all you hoped and dreamed about, Shane.
Yeah, well, they're fantastic for sure. Like some of the views that we had were, really incredible. Like I would say M81 and 82 were really, really nice. Like it's the first time I think in a refractor that I was really getting some like obvious detail within the structure
Yeah.
of those galaxies. Especially the cigar galaxy there, like, you could see that dark spot quite well. And it wasn't even that it was like just a dark spot. Like I felt like I could see a little bit of that sort of unevenness there. So,
Hmm. Hmm.
really impressed with that view. What else really caught my eye that night? Darn, I'm skipping a beat here, but the thing kind of in general that stood out for me too is just again the aperture and what that does for the view. Like I think we were looking at M35, which
Hmm.
nice a nice Messier object, but below that was some sort of nebula that was quite bright, in the field of view. And my little 4 inch, it would have been neat to have the 4 inch there that night and
Yeah.
have like kind of comparing views just to see how different it really is. Because I think that nebula, whatever that was, probably would have been softly visible in the 4 inch, but it might have been quite missable. Like you may not have really noticed it. Um,
Yeah.
so
So
yeah,
just a
go ahead.
quick point of clarification. It was the M38 we were looking at, or it
Mm.
was either M38 or M36, which is very nearby M35, and we did look at M35 after that. So
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, I was
no.
getting those ones confused, but
Mm.
um, yeah, it just performs so well. And we were playing a little bit with Jupiter there just to see, how much color the achromat induced on it. And I think you were at sort of a medium power, and it really wasn't apparent to me. Like I didn't really notice color. When
Yeah.
you cranked up the magnification, the purple really jumped out at us, but
Yeah.
the views were still quite nice of Jupiter. And the 99% of the stuff in the sky that you're looking at, I don't think is bright enough to really induce that color from the achromat anyway. So
Right.
so yeah,
Yeah.
I thought the views were wonderful. And the first time I was out there, you and I speculated that the views through the 7 inch were similar to a 10 inch reflector.
Yeah.
And I think that night number two really supported that for me, at least.
Yeah.
I don't know what your thoughts are. I think you're sort of similar.
Yeah. Yeah. It's basically because, and I think where we arrived at this was just looking at M81, M82. That level of detail, and I've looked at them quite a lot with a lot of different 10-inch reflectors. My friends in Ontario have lots of 10-inch reflectors. Some of them, sort of mass produced, but really good sky watchers. Some of them hand built, like my friend Peter has made one called the Perfect 10. Because it's a 10-inch, and supposedly he was trying to aim for a level of perfection in the optics and design, but he got pretty close. If not, it is a perfect 10.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, it reminds me more of the views I've had through those, which are quite memorable, because I always feel like a 10-inch scope is such a great size instrument. It's large enough that it really pulls in the light. It's small enough that it still cools and isn't terribly beat up by the atmospheric seeing. Typically, if the seeing is good enough or okay or reasonably good, a 10-inch will still perform pretty good,
Mhm.
and the 7 inches again very much like that, maybe even a little bit better because it's not quite a 10-inch, and then it pulls in that extra light. But yeah, I find with it more so than any other instrument, and this is also as I'm getting even more experienced in observing, you tend to pick up those field objects in it. Like when we were looking at, I think it was either M38 or M36, and then we were picking up like NGC 1931, and that we were able to scan over and just see like the flaming star, even though none of this stuff was spectacularly high. I think it was 5, 10, 15. I think it was like 25 or 30 degrees up in the sky. Not low, but not like overhead or something. And I've certainly seen this stuff in my 5-inch overhead using a nebula filter. But yeah, it really kind of is a whole different game apart from a 5-inch refractor, that's for sure.
Mhm. Oh yeah, yeah, big difference there. It would be neat also to run it beside a 6-inch refractor and compare the views there too.
That's your job.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know that I'm going there.
Mm,
I love that 4-inch so much.
mm.
It's a wonderful little scope. Um, yeah, it'd be pretty hard for me to part ways with that.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned this maybe in the podcast, but certainly to you. My original intent was to get a something like a telescope service, 150 or 152 millimeter um, ED of some sort.
Yeah.
They've got one that often comes up for an excellent price, and like a 1200 millimeter focal length, so f8. And that would be like the maximum size that observatory could handle, but it could handle that instrument. It would be a
Mhm.
nice instrument for it. But one of my concerns was that I might not notice that much of a difference going from only a 5 to
Mm.
a 6-inch.
Mhm. Yep.
And that's just not that much of a jump. But I have seen like that they do perform really well on the planets, which I do enjoy lots of planetary observing. So that's a bit of a compromise in going to a 7-inch Acromat. However, conversely, with a 7-inch f6, you get a much wider field of view at 1080 millimeter focal length than you do with a 1200 millimeter focal length. Those are quite different focal lengths, having owned those focal lengths now myself. So
Mhm. Mhm.
everything's a trade-off when you're dealing with this. And like you said, with regard to the objects, 99% of the objects that you look at are not going to be impacted by the secondary color. And then as well, like I went out Friday night was an okay night. Like it was a good night, not like the best night I've ever seen or anything. It was okay. It was decent
Mhm.
on Friday night here. But the seeing wasn't that good. And that's often the case. It's like, oh, it's a good night to observe, but the seeing isn't that good. So you look at the planets in dusk or whatever for a few minutes, and then you move on to your deep sky observing once it gets dark. And that's often par for the course. And so on that night, I was kind of like, like this makes a lot more sense to have this instrument, especially at a dark sky like my sky here, which I think we think is about a Bortle 4-ish type sky, depending on which direction you're looking. So yeah,
Mhm. Mhm.
yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it sure was. Yeah, I enjoyed
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
It was a
and
little
the
chilly at times, and
yeah,
I was reminded too that once I hit that warm up stage where it's like, okay, go warm up,
Yeah.
it's my time is very diminished out there because that cold just doesn't
Mm,
leave my bones. And when I went home that night, I it took me about 45 minutes in bed just to warm up to the point where I could fall asleep. It was just
yeah.
like once that gets in you, it's in you.
Yeah, that's like I have like, and I'm looking at it here, like just a pile of warm clothes. And I didn't even think of it at the time. I had an extra pair of insulated pants you could have grabbed and put on. They would have looked like capris on you, but you would have been much warmer.
Well, I
But
had I had insulated pants that night.
oh,
I
you
just
did.
needed, I
Yeah.
think, one more layer on the
Yeah.
pants. The torso was pretty good.
Yeah.
I was wearing my heated jacket, but anyway, it was still a fun night.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
and we
think
had
that
that super strange aurora. Do you remember that?
that's right. Yeah, I was going to remind you. Yeah, that was weird. Yeah, do you want to mention what that was about?
Yeah, so we were just, observing and talking, and I don't know if it was me or Mike or you. One of us looked up, pretty much right at zenith, and there was like this orb, almost like this giant glow that would have been, I don't know, 20, 30 degrees wide, just quickly estimating. And it would like just pulsate. It would be there for 5 to 10 seconds, and then it would just fade away. And then it would come back and fade away, come back and fade away. But it never really moved, and it didn't really change shape. Like,
No.
a lot of aurora, we were talking about sort of dances, and you see the curtains move, but this thing was just like a soft light that was there and then gone. And then we went indoors for, I'm guessing, 30 minutes ish to warm up.
Mm,
And then we came back outside and it had moved from zenith to the west, but then it just did the same thing there. It sort of
yeah.
pulsated irregularly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was very strange. And then when I drove home, there was a number of curtains of aurora in the north, sort of what I would call normal aurora.
Yeah.
But
Weird.
yeah, that was a weird one.
Yeah. Yeah, I've never seen one quite. I've seen some strange aurora though, so it's not that far out of the ordinary to see an aurora like you've never seen before. But yeah, after I moved here, because like being from out east, you're outside of the aurora window, and then when you do see them, they're just on the horizon. So sometimes it's just a glow, or if there's a lot of curtains, you might see that, but it's like almost postage stamp size. If you can find the right spot, you can see them from time to time, and they can be beautiful, but they're
Mhm.
small, small, small. Whereas here, you can be right in the aurora, which is probably we were probably looking at the bottom of a curtain or something. That's the only thing I can think of.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Very interesting. And luckily, it really wasn't too distracting for observing that night. So, sometimes the aurora can kind of wash out the usage of the telescope.
Yeah. We looked at Jupiter and Mars. We tried a couple different filters. The kind of I have the very inexpensive 2-inch Sieve Bunny, or however you say it, minus violet filter, because I there was a listener that had gotten it and said it was pretty good, and I find that works the best. I had read in the past that the contrast booster works excellent as a minus violet filter. But to be honest, I'm just not seeing it. Typically, that's my favorite filter to use, as you and any long-term listeners will recognize. But I do find that just using that very sort of middling CA filter from Symphony is really the best at reducing the secondary color. At least so far, we haven't had a really good night for planets yet, so I'll continue to experiment with that. And it almost makes me think of getting one of uh, those actual like full-on proper semi-apo or chromatic control filters from Bader. But I don't know, you can see a lot of detail on the planets. Even with Mars the other night, I was able to see like polar caps and some of the surface detail, though it's getting pretty small now. So that's the way it goes.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
We also looked at the Markarian's chain that night you were out. That was cool.
Yeah, that was I think the last thing we looked at when before we went in to warm up. But yeah, that was really nice. We saw what, 4 or 5 galaxies, I think, in the field of view.
Yeah, something like that. We were starting to get a bit cold by then, and then I think we also looked at that Gaia star, which has that planet with potentially has life in it. There's this
Yeah,
planet
yes.
K2-18b, and that's in orbit. And it was I'd heard about this, and every time I hear like, oh, there's this planet in orbit around some star and it might have life, and I look it up, and inevitably it's like in the southern hemisphere, or it's in a part of the sky that's not visible at this time of year at all, or it's going to be at like 2 o'clock in the morning or later or something. And then I had to cross reference. I knew it was in Leo, so I'm like, oh, Leo's at the meridian in the evening. But how bright is it? There's all kinds of different things because, oh, it's a 20th magnitude star that only the Hubble can see, right? Oh, well, so much for that.
Hmm.
Um, but this one was a 13th magnitude star, smack dab in southern Leo, which a 7-inch refractor at a Bortle 4 or slightly better sight would have well within its grasp. And I was able to cross-reference and find the Gaia star catalog number and plot that into our field of view. And we all had a look at a star that has potentially a planet with life in orbit around it, which was super cool, eh?
Yeah, it was pretty neat. At 13th magnitude, it certainly didn't slap us in the face.
No.
Averted vision made it much easier. Wasn't quite threshold for that 7 inch, but you're getting close, I think, with 13th magnitude. But yeah, it was neat to see it. I really enjoyed that view.
Yeah. Yeah, that was kind of cool. That was kind of cool for sure. And that's one of the things that I wanted to do with this setup, and by uh, getting the software to work on a phone that's customized and super super dim. That phone is hard to look at. But it's because I have the screen is dimmed red, and then there's some internal settings that one of the listeners sent to me. I never would have figured this out on my own, but Roy sent me all this configuration stuff, and I was like, when I did it on my phone, I was like, oh, I don't want to do it on my own phone because I'm too lazy to go and do this and then revert it back every time. So what I did is, and I think he even sent like extra instructions to me on how to do like a special double tap or some sort of shortcut. And I was like, but I have all these old, or not all these old phones. We had an old iPhone around that my wife had previously, and I thought, well, I'm just going to use that, and then it's like dedicated to this purpose. So I have that set up, and then I think typically it'd be pretty hard to figure out which star it is that has that planet around it. But when you have that software and that, you can just kind of dial it up. And as one of many things you look at that evening, you can take a peek at some of this stuff, which you might otherwise never get around to.
For sure.
Um, I sketched the ghost of Jupiter that night,
Okay.
which that was the
Oh yeah,
planetary
yeah, I
nebula
remember
down
that.
there in Hydra.
Yeah, it had a nice blue tone to it.
Yeah. Yeah, very nice and blue. Very nice and blue. I'm just going to take a note. I still should go back and finish that sketch, but and then you took off wisely at that point, and Mike and I decided we were going to be hardcore and go for a couple more hours. And really, we only went for maybe another 20 minutes. I'm gonna
Mm.
say. And I forget what we tried. We tried looking at something, and I think we failed to see one or two things. This is always how the sessions deteriorate. It's like, now we're gonna look at this, and then it's like, no, either we're too tired or the conditions aren't there, and then we're like, all right, let's look at M13 and call it a night. So we looked at that, and wow, like those Messiers, those brighter Messiers, in fact, all the Messiers we've looked at so far just become such showpiece objects. And once you get into instruments like this, it was really up there with the best views I've ever had of M13. And there's a little galaxy nearby. And again, this is only about 25 degrees up in the east. And to the southeast is where the city is. The east is really good, but it still would have some of the light pollution. But we were able to immediately see NGC 6207, the little galaxy nearby. It was just there. Like soon as you looked in, you saw it.
Hmm.
We were using like about 60 power or something in it, and it was just immediately present next to just that swarm of stars. It just was so uh, striking in the field of the 17 millimeter. Just amazing.
Hmm. Well, some of the globulars that we were looking at earlier, again, I forget which one, or I think
Oh
there's a
yeah, I
couple.
think with the M53 or M3 or something. Yeah.
Yeah, and just being able to start to see that it was a stellar globular, like
Mm,
you were able to see individual stars, and in the 4 inch it would just be a puff of light. Like you wouldn't probably be able to
mm,
see some of the individual stars. So yeah, that aperture really does shine on the bright objects, and then definitely, it allows you to see some other fainter stuff too. But it's fun to look at, the brighter Messiers and the brighter NGCs, because you start to see all kinds of new detail. And you and I have talked about it before, but different apertures and different magnifications sort of change how you see the sky, right? Like you might know an object
right.
because you've looked at it many, many times, but when you start to vary, especially the aperture, the object just takes on a whole new appearance. So sometimes you want more magnification, and sometimes you actually want less, but depending on the object. But it is fun to do that, and see what you can see essentially.
Yeah. Yeah, I think just before we get on to some of the other observing we've been doing, I got to say this about a 7-inch f6 refractor is that it's sort of in a way surprising that these weren't more popular. Like having used one now like many times, I've had it for over a year, but having used it now for the past 4 months, um, I really like the views, like in fact, more than I thought I would, which is kind of hard to believe because my expectations were set fairly high in what I was hoping to experience through it, and having owned lots of refractors and looked through even, many, many more. I'm just really surprised how good it is, and that it wasn't popular enough to make or sell more than 8 or 9 of them is just really an unfortunate thing, considering I know of and have seen and follow a lot of like the observatory builds, and although they say this is a portable instrument, I think it would be for some people, but I think really it is best served to have in an observatory. But these instruments aren't a whole heck of a lot more than a Celestron C11, and I think it fits quite nicely in the 8x10 observatory. I mean, as with all observatories, sure, be nice to have an extra foot or two on any given side, but it's not horribly tight in there, even with three of us, and certainly by myself, it's loads of room in there for that instrument and me to observe. And typically, people are building these observatories and putting an 11-inch Schmidt Cassegrain in there. So, yeah, it's just kind of an unfortunate thing that they never really caught on in popularity. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but that's kind of mine.
Yeah, the Acromat definitely has sort of a poor reputation, I think, within astronomy, and I don't believe it's really earned. Sure, there's color on bright objects, but a well-made Acromat is a great telescope and functions exceptionally well. Even like typically the acromats will be a longer focal length to try to deal
Mm,
with some of that aberration, but even yours with being a fast telescope, but it's well made and a well figured lens, it's a great performer. So I think like if you're into refractors, and you want aperture, going down the Acromat route is certainly like a valid option. It saves you some money, and it gives you some great deep sky views.
yeah, it's weird too. Like having been in this game for a long time, it is strange because I own a 5-inch Apochromat made by Pentax, which perhaps arguably is among the best lens makers in the world. And with the 7-inch and a $50 filter, and these telescopes are about comparable in cost ish, give or take. Um, that that I can see more in the 7-inch. And of course, someone's going to say, well, yeah, it's got 2 more inches of aperture. Um, but so I'm not really sure what the compromise is then, if that's the argument that they give a lot of secondary color, and this does reduce what you can see on the planets, and it does for sure. It just doesn't reduce it that much. You're losing, it probably, like you said, it would be neat to test it against a 6-inch apochromat. I bet you on the planets it shows what a 6-inch apochromat shows, because it certainly shows a lot more than you can see in a 5-inch apochromat.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And with a $50 filter, it seems like it's awful close, especially on Jupiter. It seems like it's really close to being like a semi-apo, I would say. So I'm curious to get like maybe one of these other better beta filters and see what I can pull out. And like I said, this telescope, not inexpensive, but you get them third or fourth hand now. And when you compare it to the, how much is that astrophysics one that is apochromatic now? 190 millimeter f6. What's that one, Ron?
Oh, I have no idea. I didn't see the price, but I'm guessing it's 20 to $40,000 US would be my guess,
Yeah.
but I have no idea.
So I'm probably like 15 times cheaper, maybe. So
Hmm.
yeah,
Hmm.
that sadly that telescope is out of reach for me and most other people. And I just don't know that I'd ever want to spend that much on an instrument, to be frank. So anyway, that's kind of my two thoughts on it. And yeah, so and I say this to people, all that equipment in there is either made third hand or given to me one way or another. And then I bought the cables, so and the plates on it, and I bought a counterweight. So I've had a few comments from people over the years. One of the comments somebody made to me, which is really ironic, is I think the week I bought the big Acromat, they made sort of a sort of a just a joke to me that I would never even look through, and I probably would never even look through an Acromat. And I wrote them back and said I just bought a really big one, which I thought was funny. And then other people have indicated, well, you probably don't even buy used gear, and I'm like, I'm buying third hand gear here. Like, we're not like that around these parts, Shane. So anyway,
Hmm.
just to kind of make it clear, this isn't all brand new fancy equipment, and I'm not really looking for that. It's not really my bag anyway. So.
Hmm.
All right, let's talk about your Etalon. I just like to say the word Etalon. I think they should bring out a car. It should be a fast car, and it should be called an Etalon.
Well, maybe, yeah. I don't know. I finally got the 90 millimeter out to try for the first time. Like I forget when I acquired this thing. Probably, I think it was like December timeframe. It was too cold and weather just didn't cooperate to really try it until a week or two ago.
Mhm.
So, in fact, it was the day after I was at your place observing with you and
Oh,
Mike.
okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You
yeah.
sent the photos. Yeah, it looks awesome.
Yeah, so it was a marginal day in terms of conditions. There was some high level cloud, but not too bad. It was good enough for me to test. So I took out the Takahashi TSA 102. It's really the only telescope that I have that I can put this Etalon on because it has an adapter that really it just slides over top of like the front end of a dew shield on a refractor.
Yeah.
And then there's some plastic tensioning screws on this adapter that, sort of secure it to the dew shield, and away you go. But my 90 millimeter is too narrow of a diameter, which means all of my other telescopes would be too narrow to attach this thing. So
Mm.
the only real option was the TSA 102, which is fine for me. So
Mm.
put that out. I was using the 10 millimeter Coronado blocking filter in conjunction with the Etalon. And I also
So
brought
where
out,
does my
go ahead.
apologies. I have some questions. So first of all, the adapter, it looks like it's made to go on the TSA. It's the same color scheme, or am I not looking at like does it look different in person? Because it looks like it's that same sort of Takahashi gray.
No, it's the photo didn't really capture the color correctly.
Oh,
Then
okay.
it's all brass essentially,
Oh,
or
it
brass
looked really
finish.
nice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It fit the scope well for sure.
And what is the 10 millimeter Coronado blocking filters? Does that go in front of this, or does that go on the diagonal, or how does that fit in?
Well, it basically is the diagonal. You can't
Okay.
use a normal diagonal with a hydrogen alpha.
Okay.
You need a special blocking filter, which is inside the diagonal. So it's a Coronado diagonal, inch and a quarter,
Mm.
and that was at the back end of the telescope.
Okay, thanks for that. I You know about this stuff. So when I want to look through this stuff, folks, I go to Shane. He sets it up. I look at the sun, enjoy the views, and yeah, it's so cool. All right, keep going. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. So I also had the Coronado 40 millimeter double stack outside just to compare views quickly.
Hmm.
And the 40 millimeter double stack Etalons are attached to my Borg 50 millimeter FL. And so I had both of them going, and it was a really fun session. I think I only observed for maybe 90 minutes because, again, a little bit of cloud in the sky. It wasn't perfect, but I just had to get this thing out to see what it did. And
Yeah.
the 90 millimeter just blew my mind. And why
Oh,
it blew my mind is like with solar observing, aperture doesn't matter about like light gathering. You
yeah.
basically blocking as much light as you can that you get from the sun using these things. But where the aperture really helps is it increases your image scale.
Mm.
So, at similar powers between the 40 millimeter and the 90 millimeter, the view of the sun and all of the features will be much larger using like even the same magnification. And what a
Wait,
difference.
what? So even with the same magnification?
Yeah, as far as I could tell. Maybe my
Oh,
magnifications weren't quite aligned, but the
is that
image
just because you're able to harness the resolution of the larger aperture? Is that what's happening there? Must be. I guess
could
that
be.
makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, I'm not
Huh.
sure. But
Wow.
because there's so much fine detail on the sun, having an image, that's far greater in sort of size, like just helps you see more stuff, more detail within the prominence, more surface detail, all of that kind of detail. So really, really enjoyed the views through the 90 millimeter.
Hmm.
Where the 40 millimeter stood out was on surface detail. When you double stack Etalons, you decrease the angstrom rating, which increases the ability to see surface detail. So there
Mm.
was some really, really dark filaments on the surface of the sun that were much, much more apparent in the 40 millimeter. I
Mm.
could see it a little bit in the 90, but nowhere near the same. Um, so that was one area where the 40 millimeter was actually better. Now, I think if I use a polarizing filter on the 90, that'll help bring out some of that filament detail. So I'd like to try
Mm.
that next time I'm out. But the other thing that the 40 or that the 90 millimeter was really, really good at is a much larger sweet spot. And anybody
Huh.
that's done H alpha observing typically knows about the sweet spot, which is like kind of where you position the sun to see like better prominence detail or better surface detail. And while there was like a little variance as the sun moved through the field of view, it was quite minor compared to the 40 millimeter. So that's
Hmm.
kind of nice to have a bigger sweet spot. And then towards the end of the session, like I was largely using super monos to observe, and I thought I'll put in a wider field eyepiece with the 90 millimeter. So I pulled out the 14 millimeter Nikon Nav SW, which was
Which
just,
I didn't know you had
yeah, I have
until
two of them, in
now.
fact.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, for bino viewing. Yeah, it's a wonderful eyepiece. Um, and it was really nice on the sun. I was quite impressed with how well it showed the sun, and it gave a full disc view, which was really, really enjoyable. Especially
Mm.
compared to the soda straw view of the super mono at a 30-degree field. The
Mm.
Nikon Nav really was really quite nice and quite easy to look through too. Like there was no
Mm.
blackouts or anything. It was good. So overall, I really like that 90 mil. Um,
Yeah.
I need to play around a little bit more and do some comparisons back and forth. One thing that the 40 millimeter is really nice, or like a huge advantage of that one, is the telescope on the tripod with all of the Etalons. Like everything you need is one hand out the door.
Yeah.
Whereas, the TSA, well, that's a pretty heavy telescope. So the mount goes out first. Then I come in and I grab the TSA and take that outside, and then I have to attach the big Etalon to it. So there's a few more
Mm.
steps involved, which
Hmm.
makes it more of a like I have to be committed, to a solar observing session for that. Whereas the 40
Yeah.
millimeter, if I wanted to have like a 10-minute view before I leave the house, it's pretty easy to do that. So
Yeah.
I kind of envision just keeping one, either the 40 or the 90. But now there's a scenario where I may keep both because they do have kind of unique use cases.
I think you should keep both
Yeah, yeah,
for
maybe.
for
Well,
for many reasons. Well, one, I'll tell you, and I'm not joking either. Not really. For one, I remember during the pandemic, and who knows when the next pandemic is going to come, Shane. You would set up the scope and you would leave it out all day. I almost got into solar observing because I was like, well, shoot, like these are good solar days. And we're having a lot of
mhm,
good days and kind of mediocre nights. I remember for like a while there when we started recording the podcast, and you were like, oh, yeah, I was out like 20 times today. I probably spent like 2 hours looking at the sun. I saw all this, and I'm just like, I'm missing out,
mhm,
right?
mhm.
And that sounded really cool. So, I mean, I think there's, and I don't know if you get too many work from home days now, but even like on vacation days, like stay at home days or on a weekend or holidays or whatever, like I know you would set up that TSA set up like that, and then you would just go out and observe, and I think you get a lot of miles in on that TSA setup like that. It just sounds like a perfect setup for you for the backyard there. Sounds awesome.
Yeah, yeah, I really like it. One neat thing with the 90 millimeter combined with the TSA is, if you leave it out all day looking at the sun and it's going to be a clear night, well, then my telescope is already out for the nighttime session
Oh,
as
that's a
well.
good point. I hadn't even thought of that. Well, there you go. You
Yeah,
just sold it.
yeah, yeah.
Just
So
pop the filter off and change the diagonal, and you're off to the races, I guess.
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
And also very intriguing for like dark sky trips to Grasslands National Park or
yeah,
wherever else I may go.
yeah.
Plopping the Edelon, into the vehicle is quite minor. It doesn't take up really any space, and then it gives you a really fun time or a fun option for the daytime while you wait for evening observing.
Uh, and I have to say, just getting back to the 14 navs, I really want you to bring those out now so I can look through them in the Bino viewer in 7-inch refractor would be quite the treat, I feel. That would be just such a beautiful power for looking at globular clusters or open clusters or what have you. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's a great focal length. They're wonderful eyepieces for sure. Yeah, like they're in the Bino viewing kit, so next time I'm out, they will be with me.
Awesome. Cool. Cool. Anything else about the Edelon before I give maybe there's 5 minutes I can give my little bit on
Yeah,
my
I think that's it
session.
for the solar observing. I guess maybe just more to come. I know we got a couple emails from listeners asking about
Yeah.
the 90 millimeter, so this is the first report of what will be at least a few more, and maybe many if I decide to keep both of them.
Yeah, so people should write in with their questions because mine are very like newbie, but there are lots of experienced solar observers out there who may have specific questions for Shane. Gmail us at actualastronomy@gmail.com. So I got out there on Friday night, Shane. It originally it looked like we might get some clear nights, and initially Saturday night looked like the Goldilocks night, but it ended up getting a bit skunk last night. But I ended up getting my life reorganized, and thanks to my wonderful, caring wife who helped with that to get us out here on Friday night and help get the observatory open. It was a bit windy, but not too windy to observe, and that night you and Mike wrote too was just a hair windier still. I don't know if you recall that or not.
Yeah, it was a little breezy for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And the one thing about having an observatory here in Saskatchewan is to get that wind off you, because I think we had all commented that the session probably would have been a little bit shorter at
Mhm.
-5 to -8, standing on a hillside in 25-kilometer-an-hour winds, which is about like -12 or 13 with the wind chill, versus inside an observatory with the majority of that wind not coming, and hitting you broadside kind of thing.
Totally. Yeah, made a big difference.
So sketching up some planetaries on Friday night, and But first, I played around with Jupiter and Mars, but it was just too unstable to really get any good views. So I had a look at M44, which is just a fantastic open cluster in the telescope.
Hmm.
Did a
Yeah, that one's
sketch of
beautiful in just about any instrument.
yeah. I was going back and forth between the Finder scope, my 54 millimeter Borg,
Mm.
Achromat. It's Achromats all the way down on that thing. So I was looking at the image at whatever it is. It gives about a 5.5 degree field of view. It's so dim, and then when you go and look through the 7 inch, it's so bright. It was really neat. And then took a look at NGC 2392, which is the Clown Face Nebula,
Hmm.
formerly of a different name, but you can sort of see a face, and sometimes looks like there's like a bit of a aura around it. And you could just start to see some of that. Like I said, the seeing wasn't amazing, but you could definitely detect the inner structure. And then I looked at this one was interesting. One of the more interesting things that I've seen, which is NGC 2371, which is a nebula. It's a planetary nebula just over towards Capella, but it's still in Gemini. It's sort of on that line, and it's called, I think, the little dumbbell or something, because it's reminiscent of the dumbbell. And then there's the little dumbbell M76, and then this one is kind of the next step down. Um, and I didn't know that. I looked that up afterwards. I just kind of did an uninformed sketch just of what I see at the eyepiece, and
Hmm.
I drew like these two wispy, tendrils coming off it. I was really surprised to see these using 216 power, my 10 millimeter in a Barlow, because my gear is disorganized and I couldn't find my 5 millimeter. Um, and looking it up afterwards, I found out that those lobes are at least a photographic magnitude of 13. So they're pretty faint, and this
Hmm.
is only 40 degrees up. So
Oh,
this
wow.
is, yeah, so that's punching a lot to see those. I didn't know they were there, like, because I don't necessarily
Hmm.
do a lot of research on these objects before I'm sketching them. And I was kind of surprised to see that they were that faint. But again, photographic, they might have been a magnitude brighter or something. But still, the integrated magnitude for the nebula itself is like 11 point something. So it's not that bright. Anyway, just kind of goes to show. Then I looked at this one's really neat. IC2149. It's one of those blinking type nebula. So you get the field, and then I have the Lumicon multiple filter selector, and you kind of scoot the O3 filter in and out, and then that nebula pops out. I tried a couple different powers, but I couldn't really get too much to show with it, sadly. So and then I don't know, I was doing a lot of different comparisons as well, and my back was getting kind of sore. So I came in and then came back out, and before I went in, I took a look at the antenna galaxies there just on the Corvus Hydra border.
Hmm.
Not sure, you've probably seen those, imagine, at
Yep.
one point in time.
Yep.
And yeah, I was able to see sort of the main two components. I couldn't get the wispy tails. I mean, it's pretty low, even just past the meridian. It's pretty low, and that's just looking over those lights over there, sadly. So they were interfering a bit, but just to see them was kind of cool. And then when I came back out, I sketched and viewed NGC 4361 right on the meridian, and that was really nice. I could see a box-like structure and some interior details, and then finished off with a view of M68. Boy, that's low. Even on the meridian here, that one
Mm.
is very, very low. I guess it was probably maybe 5 degrees east of the meridian, but I went another maybe 15 or 20 degrees east to M83, and that was just on the edge of the part of the sky where it's kind of getting bright over there. and it was too much. I saw it. I'm not going to say I saw it. Uh, it's low, and I think you'll recall, like when you're getting that low, you have to put the drop down down. We were looking at
Oh
some stuff,
yeah, in the observatory. Yeah, yeah.
and I had it down, but I still think the telescope was losing some aperture
Mm.
from it was the edge of it was probably 2 inches below the dew shield anyway. So I was probably losing a little bit of aperture, and the sky was definitely a bit bright, and I was getting really tired and a bit sore. And it was also, when you're looking that low, one of the downsides of a refractor, if there are any, but there are, is that that eyepiece is getting super high in the air. And
Yeah.
I really should have brought in the step ladder to kind of climb up and peer down through the eyepiece. Because, and I'll get on to my next little report, which is I was comparing the Prism diagonal to the Lumicon multiple filter selector. Some interesting results there, but I had the multiple filter selector in, and it's more difficult to rotate around. So I can turn it a little bit, but I can't turn it like 90 degrees perpendicular to the telescope. So anyway,
Mm.
but I did a couple things. One of them was I was trying to get the 2X Barlow from GSO to work on the diagonal or on the eyepieces, the 12 millimeter or the 17 millimeter Explorer Scientific 92 degrees.
Hmm.
And it's, Shane, we talk about the futz factor. It's too high.
Yeah. Just too much messing around.
It's too much mess around. You need, if you're putting it in the on the diagonals, you need to have an extra extension in. So then you have two extenders. It's, you can do it and it works. And the optics, it looks great. It's just like having, you know, um, like a 6 millimeter or a 8.5 millimeter, which gives some great powers. But for me, in my observing, I don't know about you, but I need to flip the powers around quicker. Okay, like, do I want a 12 or a 10 or a 7 or a 5? Like, what's going to work best on this target? And you
Hmm.
can't do that because, I mean, you're reworking your whole eyepiece set. So maybe if you rework the whole thing to include those, but now you're losing like the 17 to 12 in their original format. So it just doesn't quite work for me. Anyway, that's sort of my result of that experiment.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Makes sense. I wonder if like a power mate or one of those like what is that, a telenegative or whatever they call
Telecentric.
teles, yeah, because that doesn't really change the focal point, I don't think. So I don't know if that would help or hinder or otherwise.
Yeah, so I'm on Cloudy Nights, and I don't post a lot on there, but I know there's this gentleman, and he's got two of them on order to try just for this purpose.
Ah, interesting.
And so I'm curious to see what he reports back. The other thing I tried, and this is something I wanted to try to do for a while, was I wanted to put the Barlow ahead of the Prism diagonal because I kind of had crunched some numbers to see if it would improve the secondary color,
Hmm.
like improve the chromatic aberration. Because if your light cone isn't as steep going into the Prism, then it could theoretically help to improve it. And the general rule is you shouldn't use a prism diagonal like I bought um, on a refractor that's this fast because it can introduce secondary color.
Hmm.
I'll say this: if it's introducing any, it's minor. If it's fixing any, it's minor. And to be honest, going back and forth between the Lumicon, which I think is a 99% dielectric that I have, and those are the same mirrors I think that Astrophysics and Teleview and a few of the other best brand names use. I think I like the Prism better in the refractor anyway. It gives more of a like a sparkle to the stars or something. It can't be brighter because I don't see how it could be brighter, but the aesthetic is that it feels brighter through the prism to my eye. Anyway, I thought that was kind of neat.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. So that's kind of my quick report from Friday night. I think we're getting to the time. I think I heard your alarm go off and mine go off here too. So anything to add before we conclude?
That is all.
All right. Well, please subscribe, share the show with other stargazers you know. If you've had any recent spring observing sessions, and I know a few people are going to star parties, we really didn't hear from that many folks the past couple of weeks, but please send in your observing reports. And you can send those to actualastronomy@gmail.com. And if you have any questions for Shane on his 90 millimeter Etalon and solar observing in general, I'm sure Shane would be happy to field those as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, everyone, for listening, and we hope you enjoyed the show. If you are interested in more information, would like to contact us, or if you would like to support the podcast, check out our website, actualastronomy.com.